Kakadosh Boker Tov Chodesh Tov. Masechet Yevamot Daf 56A1. We are on the two dots, which is the second line, right, where it's talking about Echad HaMe'areh, Amareh ve'Echad HaGomer Kana. So by the Yevam to his Yevama, whether he did a full relations or he did Ha'ara'ah, which is just, we said yesterday was a machloket, whether it was Neshikat Ever or Miknisat Atara, which is basically bringing in the crown, right? So he comes and he says he's going to acquire. So that's to do with the Yevama. Says the Gemara, my Kana. What does it mean now? Kana, right? It says over here that he was going to be Kana et Yivimto. So Rav Amar Kana lakol, uShmuel Amar lo Kana ela ledvarim amurim beparasha dirash b'nechse achiv ulpotra mina b'yibum. Which means like this. Here it says Kana. What is the translation Kana? So Kana means he acquires. But acquires what? So according to Shitat Rav, Rav says he's acquiring everything. Everything means he's 100% married to her. That is the Shita of Rav. Shemuel though, so for example, one of the examples that it gives here is, for example, eating teruma. Yeah, let's say he's right now, right, the Kohen, and the Yevama is a Bat Israel. So therefore, she's going to come and she's going to eat teruma immediately. While she was married to her first husband, obviously she's going to eat teruma. The second that the first husband dies, she does not eat teruma. Why? Because she has no children. If she had a child, so then she could eat teruma because of the child, right? If she was the other way around, let's say she's a bat kohen. So she was a bat kohen married to a Israel, so she used to eat teruma until she got married to the Israel. Once the Israel dies, so now it's the opposite case. If she has children, she never eats teruma again. She doesn't have children, she goes back to her parents' house, then she eats teruma again. But here it's talking about a bat Israel to a kohen. No children, so she doesn't eat teruma anymore. The second that she does the yibum, now again she's able to eat the teruma again. So that is the shita of Rav. Rav. Ushmuel Amar. Shmuel comes and he says, Lo kana ela ledvarim amurim beparasha. She's only acquiring the things which are written in the parasha vibum. Where's the parasha vibum? Yeah. Lirash b'nechse achiv. Number one, to do with Yerusha. Yerusha of what? Of the property of the brothers, which means that they don't divide with it. None of the brothers take any portion of the Yerusha other than the Yavam. The Yavam takes the whole pot. Yeah? Number of the deceased brother. Number two, Ulpotra mina yibum. Also, he acquires her to exempt her from the Zika of Yibum, because once he did the Yibum, Kamarno, that's it, Kanaota. But he does not Koneota leduma for eating of teruma. Okay? Next. Yeah, says the Gemara, Mina nisuin ledivrei hakol. If it's going to be that she fell from the nisuin, which means she was actually married, 100% marriage, nisuin, right? Ledivrei hakol. So then, according to everybody, if he's going to have relations with her, achla. So then she's going to be eating in teruma. Why? Because she was already eating teruma beforehand. Okay, so therefore, the fact that now he's going to acquire her, right, is not going to change much because she was always eating teruma until now. So what's the nafkamina, right? This is how Rashi is learning it. Okay. However, though, he comes and he says, right, ki pelige. When is there a machloka between Rav and Shemuel? Mina erusin, from the erusin, because when she was an arusa at the time of the death of her husband, she never ate teruma. An arusa does not eat teruma. Let's say a kohen gets engaged. Remember, engagement of the Torah, not our engagement. Engagement of the Torah. She still doesn't eat from the husband. She eats from the father's house. So since she eats from the father's house, she's still not allowed to eat truma. When does she start eating truma? When she gets married, right? Rav comes and he says, ochelet, right? She's allowed to eat truma. That means, here we're talking about, by the way, remember, we're talking about a biat shogeg. Right? Because it was like a hara. We're talking about like a small, it wasn't a full biyah, meaning it wasn't a mamash he had kavanah and he wants to acquire her, you understand? So for here, it was like b'shogeg because it was hara. So he says, Rav still says, she eats. Why? Rabbi rachamana biyat shogeg kemezid. Because to do with the yibum, the Torah added right? Shogeg kemezid. Ushmuel amar, but Shmuel says, Ki Rabbi Rachmana lukme mimkom ba'al le'alume mi ba'al lo. Shmuel comes and he says, when does the Torah come and add mimkom ba'al le'alume mi ba'al lo? That's only instead, in place of the husband, but not stronger than the husband. So for here, right, if she wasn't eating truma at the time of the husband, because she was only a nerusa, so too by the yavam, she's not allowed to eat truma unless there's a true biyah, meaning unless there's a real marriage, meaning that stama biyah, like biyah grua, he calls it here. A biyah grua means like a bad biyah because it was only hara, it wasn't a real biyah. She can't eat truma. Yeah, she can't eat truma. The other Shmuel goes according to his reasonings. The Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel says Rav Nachman name of Shmuel, Kol she'abal ma'achil, hayavam ma'achil. Kol she'abal ma'achil, hayavam ma'achil. Which makes sense. At the end of the day, Shmuel is basically just saying, listen, what is ibum? That the brother comes instead of the husband. So just like if the husband could not give to eat because he was only an arusa, so too now it cannot give to eat unless it's mamash. It becomes ibum. Once it's a full ibum, so then it's ishto lechol davar. Then it's 100% his wife. You understand? But until then, nothing. It's only instead of. Okay, fine. So that was the machloka between Rav and Shemuel. Ask the Gemara mitvei. So now the Gemara is going to ask a question on Shemuel from the following Beraita. Bat Israel pikachat shenitarsa lekohen pikeach. Imagine right now you have a Bat Israel normal. Normal means pikachat. She's normal. She's not, obviously we're going to see afterwards, right? To do with why are you saying pikachat? And usually we just say Bat Israel to Kohen or whatever it is, but here no. Bat Israel pikachat shenitarsa lekohen pikeach. Velo speak lekonsa. He didn't have time to take her into the nisuin. Okay. Ad shanit charesh, until he became a cheresh. So here we're not talking about actually yibum. Forget yibum. Come out of the yibum story. We're talking about regular marriage. So you have a kohen, normal bat Israel. He does erusin. Yeah, what is erusin? The first process of marriage, right? Which is a real erusin, right? With the ring, everything normal. Okay, fine, perfect. Chazak uruch, mazal tov, mekudeshet, b'simon tov, b'shat tov, u'mutzlachat. All of a sudden, right? They have the wedding date. What's the date? Whatever the date is. Aleph Aviyah. Okay, Mitsuyan. Right? No, Sefirat Omen. Okay. Let's say in the middle, whatever. Lad Vaomen. Whatever you want. Okay, Mitsuyan. Lad Vaomen is a wedding. All of a sudden, he becomes Cheresh. Yeah, he becomes Cheresh. Okay? So now what happens? She's not allowed to eat Truma. Why? Here it says, because his wedding is not a wedding, right? Even to do with Truma midrabanan. Right, but the Gemara is going to explain, the Chachamim are going to come and say that if they're going to permit this woman, right, to start eating truma, they're going to start permitting her to eat truma, even in a case where he was cheresh at the time of the erusin. And if he was a cheresh at the time of the erusin, so therefore there's no real kinyan, because it's like cheresh and lodat, right? Cheresh usually is deaf mute, but here, let's see. So it's over here. Ena ochelet, she doesn't eat truma. Met. What happens though if he dies? V'nafla, right? Lifnei yavam cheresh. So now, to her mazal, not only did her husband become a cheresh, right? The yavam is also a cheresh. So the husband, so look at her mazal. L'ayna what a mazal. Right? She comes, she gets married, her husband became cheresh. Then he died. And then she falls in front of a yavam cheresh also as well. So what happens? Right? Ochelet. Now she's allowed to eat truma. Right? Why? Because, right, it says over here, ochelet mitruma. Here she could eat truma because the yibum alidei cheresh, right, is not worse than a biat shogeg, right? So therefore, he comes and he says, and just like the Torah came and said that the biot grurot, they help to do with yibum, so too here, it's going to help to do with yibum. So to do with yibum, it does help. So ochelet, uvezo yafeh koach hayavam mikoach bal. So here we found the case where the strength of the yavam is stronger than the strength of the husband. So here you see that the Gemara is asking Shemuel, you just told me that it can never be that the yavam is stronger than the husband, right? And therefore, if the husband could not give to eat truma, which was by Irusin, so to now it cannot give to eat truma because it was a biagrua. Here you do have a case where the koach of the yavam is greater than the koach habal. That's what we just said. What do you mean? I understand by Rav, it's actually good. Why? Because even by a biagrua, he could give her to eat truma. But according to Shemuel, kashya. According to Shemuel, it's a question. So it says, Shmuel is going to answer you. No, you have to say like this. What was the case? He did kiddushin. He was normal. She was normal. Fine. Then he became cheresh, right? Before he had time to do a wedding, right? But which is an isuin. Kanas, right? So ena ochel b'truma. She doesn't eat truma. Kanas ve'achar kach nitcharesh. What happens though if he did get married and only afterwards nitcharesh? So ochelet, obviously, right? Why? Because it was a marriage. She was 100% married. Perfect. Very good. Met v'nafla lifnei yavam cheresh. What happens now if this guy died, right? And now she falls in front of a yavam cheresh. Ochelet, she could still eat, right? Why? Because even b'chaye bala she was eating truma. Because she already started eating truma, so now she could continue eating truma. Says ulemai bezo. So then, according to this, what is the explanation then? Bezo yafe koach hayavam mi koach habal. So he says dilu baal cheresh miikara lo ochelet, dilu yavam cheresh miikara achla. It's not that by the yavam, meaning like this. How is Shmuel going to answer you? Shmuel's answering you. We have a Gemara Mefudeshet saying koach hayavam is stronger than koach habal. How could that be? We thought it was like what we just explained before. That if right now the husband got married and he was already a yavam, he was already a cheresh, sorry, right? It's not good. But the yibum is good by a cheresh. So therefore we thought, bezo, in this case, yafeh koach yavam koach habal. Says Shmuel, that's not the case. The case was she went and she got married 100%, and he was still the pikeach, meaning he was still good, he was still normal. Then he became cheresh. Then all of a sudden, he dies. So now she falls to yibum to the brother, and the brother is a cheresh. Okay, the brother is a cheresh. So now she's going to continue eating truma. Now it says in this the case where the koach of the yavam is greater than the koach of the baal. Why? Because by the baal cheresh miikara telozeh. Meaning, if he would have been a cheresh from the beginning, it didn't help. Here by the yavam, the cheresh miikara does help. Because at the end of the day, biagrua still helps by yibum. So for this case, yafeh koach hayavam mi koach habal. That's how Shmuel is going to come and he's going to answer you. Okay? Ikadamli. There are those that say that no, really be'emet mina erusin l'divrei hakol lo achla. Remember, we at the beginning of the Gemara we went and we brought down a machloket Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel, they had a machloket in the Gemara, and the Gemara was a kana lakol or not lakol. And again, the machloket that we went and we said was 100% was on what? Was on to do with eating truma. Okay? So now he comes and he says like this. He comes and he says as follows. He comes and he says, at the beginning we said that what was the machlok between them? Mina erusin. So we said mina erusin. Why? Because if it was going to be mina nisuin, kule alma lo plige, the what? Shachla. So if it was from the marriage, everybody says that she continues eating truma. If it's from the erusin, machloket Rav and Shmuel. Now the Gemara is going to change it. V'ika de amri. Some people say mina erusin l'divrei hakol lo achla. Meaning, before we say lesuin mi divrei hakol achla, erusin is a machloket. Now we're saying erusin divrei hakol lo achla, and then the machloket is obviously going to be by nesuin. So says the Gemara, v'ikadami, those that say we have a different version between the machloket Rav and Shmuel. Mina erusin divrei hakol lo achla, ta lo achla b'chebal. She never ate during the lifetime of the husband. So for sure that she's never going to eat it again. One is a machloket meaning nesuin. Rav Amar ochelet. Rav says she could eat. Because at the end of the day, she was eating during the lifetime of the husband, right? So because since biagrua was good by the yavam, so therefore she could continue eating, but she was already eating by the husband. And Shmuel says, why? When did the Torah say that the biat shogeg by yavam is like a mezid? But only the things which are written in the parasha. But not everything else. No. Which means, come Shmuel and he says, in the Torah, what was written? To do with that she doesn't need yibum anymore. That means the zikah plus yerusha. Those are the only two things which are written in the Torah that the yibum helps, and that it's going to be a biagrua, it helps for that, but not to do with truma. So according to Shmuel, even though she was eating truma until today, Bia Grua does not help to do it with Truma. So therefore, according to this, by Nisuin is a machloket between Rav and Shmuel. According to Rav, since she was eating beforehand, she continues eating now. And according to Shmuel, she does not eat now. Rav Nachman and Shmuel kol shabal ma'achil yavam ma'achil. So 1 second, but Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel says, anytime that the Baal could be ma'achil, also the Yavam could be ma'achil. So how could you tell me now that all of a sudden in this case, he cannot be ma'achil? It was one more time. Could the Baal be ma'achil? The answer was yes. He was ma'achil already. Everything was good. So now here also the Yavam should be ma'achil. So answers the Gemara, no. Ema kol sub kol bia shabal ma'achil ba hayavam ma'achil ba. You have to learn that any bia that the Baal could be ma'achil ba, so to the Yavam could be ma'achil ba. Kol bia shenabal ma'achil ba. But if the husband cannot be ma'achil with that bia, so to ena Yavam ma'achil ba, so to the Yavam cannot be ma'achil with that bia as well. So here bia grua, according to Shmuel, cannot be ma'achil teruma. Says the Gemara, Meitvei. So now we're going to ask a question on Shmuel again. We keep on picking on Shmuel, yeah? But now we're asking a question on Shmuel from this Braita now. Bat Yisrael pikachat shenitasa lekohen pitkiach. Again, normal Bat Yisrael, that she gets married to a normal Kohen, right? And there was only Yerusin. Velo yispik lekonsan. She didn't have enough time to get married until shenitcharesh, until the guy becomes a cheresh. What a mazal. Ena ochelet. She does not eat truma. Met, right? Even a better mazal, yeah? Met if he dies. V'nafla lifnei yavam cheresh. And now he falls in front of it. She falls in front of the yavam cheresh. Ochelet. Now she could eat in truma. Uveze yafeh koach yavam mikoach bal. So here the koach of the yavam is much greater than koach bal. So here you see, right? Bishlam al Rav. It's good according to Rav. Why? Because we're talking about according to him, right? What did Rav say? Rav says that the one that's falling in front of the ibum mina erusin, and bia grua is not going to acquire it. Even though we learned that yavam cheresh, right, could give to eat truma. Here it's erusin, and therefore mitares because it mikara. He could answer just like we answered above. But according to Shmuel, that he says that even if it's going to be that she was eating in the lifetime of the husband, she does not eat again because of the bia grua. Kashya. It's a question why? Because here you see that yavam cheresh, that he has biato bia grua, right, and he doesn't have kinyan. Still, he's going to be machil even to truma. Says the Gemara, you're right, Kasha. This is a good question. Meaning, this braita of the Kohen Puikeach is a good question against Shemuel. And therefore, we finish off with a question against Shemuel. I don't know why the Gemara does not mention it, but I'm sure probably somebody does mention it, that is she obligated to do the ibum to this husband or not? To the Cheresh.
He's not, I wouldn't,
we learned in the Braita. Bat Yisrael pikachat shenitasa lekohen, right? Pikach. We always speak of konsat shenitcharesh. Ena ochelet. Nolad la ben. What happens now? She has a child from that kohen cheresh. Ochelet. She does eat truma. Why? Because of her son. We already mentioned this halacha beforehand. That means if she has a son, the son is the one that's machil ota. Exactly, right? So therefore it says meta ben. What happens if the son dies? The Binatan says ochelet, right? So she could still eat the truma because of her husband. Okay, but Chachamim only mean ochelet. Chachamim say no. My time, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Natan that after the death of the husband she could still eat because of the husband? Amar Rabba says oil shekvar achla, meaning that since she already started eating b'chayah ben, so she could still continue eating b'chayah bala, even though the husband is still nitcharesh. Yeah, he's nitcharesh.
Okay,
he's nitcharesh, right? Meta ben, a ben died, not the husband. The son died, meaning because once he became the cheresh, then it would be a question, right? Sorry, no, why? Because remember, because Louis speaks the conception in cheresh, which means mina Torah, the cheresh doesn't have dat. So if he has no dat, it's not a real nisuin. But midrabanan, we say, okay, it's considered a nisuin. So now what happens is, if she has a child, now she's eating because of the child, and the child is 100% normal. And what happens is the child dies, so then she goes back to eat because of the husband. 1 second, but you said because of the husband she can't eat, because it wasn't a good marriage. No, says Rabbi Natan, the fact that she started eating because of the son, so now she could continue eating because of the husband, because mikoach the son, that she started eating beheter. Okay? So says the Gemara, Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Chol shekvar achla b'chayah ben. Elmaleh Abai comes and he asks, Ela me'ata bat Yisrael shenisel lekohen. Imagine right now you have a regular bat Yisrael, she gets married to a kohen. Okay? Umitlei, right? And now the kohen dies without children. So techad, let her eat. Why? Shekvar achla, she already started eating. Ela kevan demile, but rather once he dies, kaddish. Pakele kiddush demile. There's no kiddushin. Gamarnu. Hachanami. So to here, kevan demile. Once the son dies, pakele kiddush demile. There's no kiddush anymore. There's no kiddushat kiuna anymore. So therefore, why does she continue eating truma? Right? Why does it make sense? Elama Rav Yosef, but rather Rav Yosef answers, Kasava Rabbi Natan holds, Nisue Cheresh Ma'achilim b'truma. According to him, even Nisuima Cheresh is going to give her to eat truma. Velo Gazrina, and we're not going to make a Gazra Nisue Cheresh atu Kiddushe Cheresh. We're not going to make a Gazra by the Nisue Cheresh, that he doesn't have da'at to do right to do the Kiddushin, that he's not allowed to give truma, by the case of Kiddushe Cheresh, which is basically from the beginning, already before the Irusin, right? It was not, which means like this. There was a big difference. In a regular case, right? What was the Avira? The Avira or the Gizera, more better said. The Gizera was, if you're going to come and permit him now, in the case of Niswin, maybe you're going to permit him in the case of Kiddushin. So says the Gemara here, he doesn't make that Gizera. Meaning by Kiddushin, from the beginning, before Kiddushin, for a Cheresh to come and do Kiddushin, that doesn't work. And everybody knows it. But by Niswin, that we said it does work. Why? Because he already did the beginning. He did the Kiddushin and he was normal. Afterwards, he became a Cheresh. Okay? So Elmaleh, Abaye comes and he tells Rav Yosef, Yachi, if so, no lala ben lamali. So why do I need in the case of the son? Even without the son, if you're not making a decree, if you're not making a gezerah, nisu echeresh atu kiddushe cheresh, which means you don't make that decree, and now she's 100% married to a kohen. I is a cheresh, what do I care? But she's 100% married to a kohen, right? So says the Gemara, so why do I need the son? Forget about the son, there was no son. So says the Gemara, mishum rabbanan, no, midrabbanan, she needs the son. Meaning, mina Torah, it would have been okay. Midrabbanan, they say, no, you still need the son in order to start eating truma. So says the Gemara, veliflog Rabbi Natan alayu b'reisha. So why don't we say this in the Reisha already? Immediately we should have said that Nisue Kohen Cheresh is not machilim mitruah. So why do we not say that until we're going to argue in Chachamim until after the next case of the son dying? So answers the Gemara, Shavik Lulu Rabbanan and the Misaimim Intayu whether Pligalayu. The rabbis first wanted to finish it, they finished the entire sentence, and then they argue. Which means, let them finish, and now let's talk. You understand? He's not going to right away jump. No. Finish. He finished everything, and now, by the way, we're going to argue. Right? Even though they could have argued already on the Reisha, but they waited. They waited until Meta Ben. Even before Meta Ben, they could have come and they said it. Doesn't matter. They waited until the end. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara, Yachiv, so Litni, so you should have learned Meta Ben and an Echelet. If the son dies, she's not allowed to eat Truma. Rabbi Natan Omer Ochelet. She could eat in Truma. Says the Gemara, gosh, it's a good question. You're right. Because we should have learned that. We didn't learn that. Okay? Fine. Next, 2 dots. Bottom of the Nun of Amud Aleph. Anybody that has relations with any of the Arayot. Okay? So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Amram, with any of their moralities, right? With any of their moral relations. Amar Rav Amram, says Rav Amram, Haminta Amalan Rav Sheshat. This is what Rav Sheshat came and he said, right? Nun Vav Mubet, 56b. Vanaharinhu le'aynin matniti. And he was me'id enenu, right? Which means he brought us a proof from our Mishnah. He brought us a proof from our Mishnah. Okay? Eshet Yisrael shenensa, af al pi shemuteret lebala, psula lekehuna. When you have an Eshet Yisrael shenensa, right? Remember, she's Eshet Yisrael. If a woman that she's not married to a Kohen, if she's violated, is she permitted to go back to her husband? The answer is yes. Yeah, 100%. So it says the Gemara, even though she's muteret lebala, she becomes psula lekehuna. What does that mean? If the husband dies, right? Now the husband dies, she cannot get married to a Kohen. Can Almana get married to a Kohen? Yes. Can a Grusha get married to a Kohen? No. Can a Chalutza get married to a Kohen? No. Right? Ve'isham Grusha Ve'isham from the Vav, Gam Grusha, Gam Chalutza. Okay? So says the Gemara. So a Kohen Idiot cannot get married to a Grusha Ve'Chalutza. Ma? Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol Betula. But Kohen Idiot Mutar Balmana. Right? That's why, right, when you have a case of an almana and the grusha, you only write down in the ketubah grusha, even if she was almana the second time around. Meaning, what happens if you have a woman that she was divorced, and then she got married to another husband and he died, and now she's getting married to a third husband? Happens, women could get married a few times. Yeah, so he comes and he says, what do you write down on the ketubah of the third husband? Exactly. Because if you would only write down almana, which was the last thing that she did, if now the second husband now would die, she would be permitted to a Kohen, and we don't want that. So you have to write down the Grusha, which automatically disqualifies her to a Kohen, even though previously she was right now just an Almanah, and she was only Grusha the first time, right? That means you write down. So therefore, remember, very careful. You have to be very, very careful, right? So therefore, one more time, you have Eshet Yisrael. She was violated. She's violated. She's still permitted to her husband. She was violated. Fine. She becomes disqualified to the Kohuna. Why? Because the second that she was violated, she is pasul to a Kohen. That's like normal.
She's Eshet Yisrael.
Doesn't matter. But if the husband dies now, yeah, says the Gemara. So it says the Gemara, Eshet Yisrael shenensafa bichmuter el bala psula lekuna. That means that you have an Eshet Yisrael that she was violated. So even though she's going to be permitted to her husband, she's going to be psula lekuna. Vetana tuna. So now this is what we learned in our Mishnah. Whether it's somebody had relations with one of the arayot in the Torah or one of the psulot to the kiuna, my vechen. What does it mean here? Vechen abba. My love lo shna b'shogev u'meshemizid lo shna me'onim v'shem retzon v'katani psala. Didn't we learn that there's no difference whether it was onesh, shogeg, mezid, psala min kiuna? That's it. She becomes psul from the kiuna. Meaning, if it's somebody from pasul to her, she becomes disqualified to the kiuna. So says the Gemara, no. My vechen, what is the vechen? Not on the psula l'kiuna, on the hara. That means hara by any other type of relations is also considered hara. Meaning somebody's going to come, he's going to say, no, Rabbi, why are you going to kill me? Why are you going to say something? All I did was hara. Hara is considered a full relations to do with any type of immoral relations. It's considered 100% asur. So says Gemara, hara deman. Which hara are we talking about now? That it's going to be posel and ishat to kiuna. If you're going to tell me it's arayot, do we learn arayot from Yevama? Adrabah, the opposite. Yevama we learn from arayot. The ikar hara is written by arayot, not by Yevama. So what's going on then? Elamai vechen. What does vechen then? Shelo kedarka darayot, which means if somebody had relations shelo kedarka with one of the arayot, right? He made her into a zona, and therefore she's psula l'kiuna. Even shelo kedarka, right? Even not the normal way. Okay, so says the Gemara, Adrabah, the opposite. Ikar mishkeve isha barayoktiv. When is it written mishkeve isha? Remember, when it says mishkeve, it's plural. Mishkeve isha is the way that you sleep with a woman. You sleep with a woman, mishkeve, plural. Why plural? It's whether one way or the other way. So therefore, it's already written shelo kedarka over there. So says the Gemara, elamai vechen. What does it mean vechen? Shelo kedarka dechayve lavi. No, shelo kedarka by keunim, by kohen. Right, to tell you that if she was nival lo kedarka, she still becomes pasul to keuna. Meaning here you have a case, Yisachar, where you have a woman, she wants to get married to the Kohen, and she's going to tell the Kohen, I'm a virgin. And she's still psula. Why? That's psula, l'kona. So Amar Rabba comes and he says, Eshet Kohen shenensa. What happens if it's a wife of a Kohen that she becomes violated? Ba'ala lokeh ala mishum zona. What happens if now if the husband has relations with her? He gets lashes. Why? Because of zona. Mishum zona in. Mishum tumalo. Says what? You're only going to give her only because of zona and not because of tum'ah. At the end of the day, she's tme'ah, which means that she's also prohibited because of tum'ah, not only because of zona. Okay, because it says in the pasuk, lo yuchal bala rishon lashuv lekachta acharei asher hu tama'a, meaning that the first husband could not take her back after she became contaminated. So therefore, there's a concept of contamination, that there's a concept of zona. So here, so answers the Gemara, ema af mishum zona. You're right, it's both. It's because of zona plus contamination. So Mati Rabbi Zera comes and he asks the following question. This is to do with a sota. Vihilo nitpasa, she wasn't grabbed, which means that she wasn't violated. Asura, then she's going to become asura to bala. But if she was violated, muter el bala. Yeshacha acheret, avish nitpasa asura. There's going to be a woman that even though she was grabbed, she was violated, she's prohibited to her husband. Who is this? So Eshet Kohen. So this is going to be the wife of a Kohen. Because to do with the wife of a Kohen, doesn't matter whether it's honest or it's on, she's always prohibited to her husband. So says the Gemara, the lava ba miklal aseh. 1 second. This is a negative commandment. The Yisur of Eshet Kohen shenensa is a negative commandment, which comes from a positive commandment. Right? Because the positive commandment was that if she was nitpasa, she's going to be permitted to her husband. Mashma, that if she's lo nitpasa, right, she's permitted. But if it was going to be Eshet Kohen, she would still be prohibited. So it's a lava ba miklal aseh is an aseh. So therefore, if it's going to be an aseh, why would you get lashes for an aseh? You only get lashes for a negative commandment, not a positive commandment. This is a negative commandment which comes from positive. Negative which comes from positive is a positive. So Rava comes and he answers, Hakol hayu bichlal zona. Every woman, right, which has relations underneath her husband, whether it's going to be beratzon or bal kurchan, was part of the zona to the Kohen. But when the pasuk came and told by Eshet Yisrael that she wasn't grabbed, asura, she's going to be permitted to her husband. Mashma hanitpasa muteret, that if she was grabbed, she's going to be permitted. So it was only a special heter by Eshet it was only a special heter by Eshet Yisrael, meaning everybody that they're violated doesn't matter. Ben be'ones nivala, doesn't matter whether it's ones or ratzon, zona. She becomes a zona. There's a special heter by Eshet Yisrael that she's still permitted to her husband, even though she became a zona. Exactly. Yeah. Why? She became a zona. Come on. Yeah. Even though she was violent. Says the Gemara, right? Some people say, Amar Rabba comes and he says, Eshet Kohen shenemsa, ba'ala lokeh la mishum tum'ah. So some people have the opposite version. That some people say that the husband is going to get lashes because of tum'ah. Says the Gemara, that's the exact opposite question. Mishum tum'ah, mishum zona lo, only because of tum'ah, not because of zona. Alma be'ones lo kanin be'zona. So it comes out that in honest, it's not called a zona. So says the Gemara. Sorry. Thank you. Mati Rabbi Zera comes and he asks the following question. V'hilo nipasa asura, nipasa muteret. V'yeshach acheret, shav b'shlim pasa asura, v'zuzo eshet kohen. Right? V'lav mikla l'se'aseh. So 1 second, we have the exact same question we asked before. This is a negative commandment which comes from a positive commandment. The positive commandment was that if she was nipasa, she's permitted. Lo nipasa, prohibited. But there's another woman that even though she's nipasa, she's going to be prohibited. Who is that? Eshet kohen. So now 1 second. That's a love which comes from a positive commandment. The lava bami klala se is considered an aseh. So a negative commandment which comes from a positive commandment is called a positive commandment. So Amar Rabba comes and he says, Hakol ayu bichlal acharei asher tumah. Everybody was considered part of the pasuk that's utama'a. But when the pasuk came in, he said that wa vilun pasa asura im nipasa mutere. But if she was scrabbed, she's going to be permitted. Miklal the eshet kohen kedekay mekayma. So it's mashma that an eshet kohen, the way that she is. Okay, fine. Says the Mishnah. Almana lekohen gadol, vegrusha v'chalutza lekohen ediot. Yeah, mina erusin lo yochelu bitruma. So the previous Mishnah already told us that biyah surah with certain people is poselet aisha to get married to a kohen and to eat in truma. Our Mishnah is talking about kiddushin to people which are prohibited to them. So that's why, again, almana to a kohen gadol, because it's only an almana which is prohibited to a kohen gadol. Almana is permitted to a kohen ediot. So almana le kohen gadol, or a grusha v'chalutza to kohen ediot, right, from the irusin. So it says the Gemara one more time, the Mishnah. Almana to a kohen gadol, or grusha v'chalutza le kohen ediot. Mina erusin from the kiddushin lo yochlu b'tumah. They're not allowed to eat truma. Why? Because they're prohibited, right? They're not allowed to get married. And almana is not allowed to get married to a kohen gadol, and a grusha v'chalutza is not allowed to get married to a kohen ediot. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon machshirin. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say they're permitted to eat because as long as the kohen did not get married to them, they're allowed to eat truma. Yeah, that means if she was a bat kohen, she doesn't become prohibited, right? Until then. And even if she was a bat Yisrael, she's eating truma because of the arusat kohen. Okay, but it's kinyan kaspo. Fine. Says the Gemara, nit armelu or nit karshu. What happens now if they became widowed or divorced? Okay, so now says the Gemara, mina nesuin, if it was from the wedding, sulot to the truma according to everybody. Why? Because they became halala through this marriage, right? But if it was only from irusin, kesherot. Okay, fine. Says the Gemara. Tanya, we learned to the right. Amar Rabbi says Rabbi Meir. Kal v'chomer, there's a kal v'chomer. Ma kiddush reshut, just like by kiddush reshut. En ma'achilin, we do not give her to eat because of kiddush reshut, which means in the case of a bat Yisrael coming and getting married to this case, so kiddush avera, here there's an avera done because it was a grusha v'chalutza to a kohen. Right, or the almanat or the kohen gadol, whatever it is. So lo kol sheken that she shouldn't start eating truma. So amru lo, they said lo, no, why? Im amarta b'kiddushay reshut sheken en lo laachil b'makom acher, tomar b'kiddushay avera sheken yesh lo laachil b'makom acher. By kiddushay reshut, right? He cannot eat. She cannot eat truma b'makom acher. Meaning another matzav right? A Yisrael will never give his wife truma. So for a Yisrael will never give his wife truma, so therefore she cannot eat. Here, the Kohen would give his wife to eat truma. It's only because it was a special case because she was permitted to him. But technically, he would give her to eat truma. So because of that, you can't bring this kal v'chomer. So Amar Rabbi Lazar says Rabbi Lazar Roshia, Pitsua daka. What about pitsua daka? Right? Well, pitsua daka is a Kohen that he is a pitsua daka, which means he's got a defect in his male organ. Okay, pitsua daka. Shekidesh bat Yisrael. Exactly. That's one of them. Is either crushed or whatever it was. So it says over here, both of them are sur. Right? That means to any Israel, to any Israelite. Okay, so he cannot get married at all. Okay, so it says here, Kohen shekidesh bat Yisrael. Banu lemachloket Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. So this is going to be a machlok between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, the man mishtameret lebiyah psula doraita lo achla. According to Rabbi Meir, that he says mishtameret. What is a mishtameret? It says here in Arbei Rishonim, it says okay mishameret. It says that she's waiting, like a shomeret yavam. Right? She's a shomeret yavam. Lebiyah psula doraita lo achla. So therefore, a woman that she's waiting for a biyah surah min Torah, she doesn't eat truma. Right? Why? Because she's waiting for a biyah surah. Hanami lo achla. So to here also she cannot eat the truma. But according to Rabbi Elazar and Shimon, the Amri Mishamel lebiyah psula doraita achla, she could eat teruma. Hanami achla, she could eat teruma. And we'll continue with Hashem tomorrow.